In 1986, 15 children boarded a school bus for a field trip and were never seen again. No crash, wreckage, no trace, but nearly 4 decades later, when a forgotten bus is found buried deep in the woods of Morning Lake, so is a survivor, and what she remembers will unravel a truth more terrifying than anyone imagined before we start. Hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. The fog had settled thick over Holstead County like a lid no one dared lift. It clung to the pint-sculled under porch lights and silenced the sound of tires on asphalt. You could drive a whole mile and not realize you passed your own childhood. That's how memories vanished around here. Quietly and without protest. It was just past 7 a.m. when the call came. Deputy Sheriff Lana Whitaker had just poured her first coffee when the dispatch crackled through possible discovery out by Morning Lake. Pinner's construction team, digging for septic tank, unearthed what they think is a school bus. Plates match a long closed case. Lana stood frozen in the silence of her kitchen, the mug warming her palm. Her hand reached automatically for the notepad she always kept near the toaster, but she didn't need to write it down. Check the case by heart. 15 children, 1 bus driver vanished in 1986. They were students from Holstead Ridge Elementary, her school, her her classmates. She'd been homesick that day, chickenpox, and for nearly 40 years carried that small, strange guilt like a splinter beneath her skin. She slid the untouched coffee into the sink, grabbed her keys, and left the house without locking the door. The drive to Morning Lake was quiet and slow, the fog dulling sound, and stretching time. Pines rose on either side of the narrow 2-lane road like patient sentinels. Lana passed the old ranger station, now abandoned, and turned onto the overgrown service road that had once led to the summer nature camp the kids were headed for. She remembered how excited they'd all been. The last field trip before summer. Breaker Lake, a fire pit, and new cabins built by volunteers. Remembered the photos in the yearbook. Smiling faces pressed against the bus windows, kids with Walkmans, Cartier backpacks, disposable cameras. She remembered them all. When she arrived, the construction crew had already cleared a perimeter. The yellow of the bus was visible in patches beneath. The mud, dull cracked and half crushed under the weight of a year's tobacco, stood motionless beside it like a guilty beast that had just unearthed a grave. Ma'am, the site foreman greeted her, removing his hard hat. We didn't touch anything once we saw what it was. You'll want to see this. Lana nodded, her throat too tight to speak. They had cleared one side of the vehicle, enough to open the emergency exit door. A sour, earthy smell hung in the air, and inside was dust mold and the brittle decay of time. The seats were still in place. Some of the seatbelts were latched. A pink lunchbox sat in the floor beneath the third row. A child's shoe lay on the back step, covered in dried moss, but no bodies. Thebes was empty. That made it worse. Somehow a hollow monument, a question mark, buried in dirt. Lana stepped inside, her boots creaking on the warped floor. The air was stale and heavy as she reached the front. She saw it taped to the dashboard, barely fitted. A class list written in the looping, cheerful handwriting of Miss Delaney, the homeroom teacher who had vanished with them. 15 names, all ages. 9 to 11 at the bottom. Someone had scrolled a message in a different hand. Darker, sloppier, written over top in red marker. We never made it to Morning Lake. Lana stepped back out of the bus, the air colder now. Somewhere behind her, a bird called out, but it sounded more like a warning than a greeting. She turned to the site foreman, her voice flat. Seal off the area. No one to say anything else until the state team gets here. Yes, ma'am. She looked back at Thebes, framed by pines and silence. They were supposed to be gone for 2 days. Instead, they never came back. And now, after nearly 4 decades, Thebes had returned without them. But someone had been here long enough to write that note, long enough to leave behind. A message the old H. Holstead County records building smelled off mildew and lemon cleaner. Its ceiling fans spun lazily like they were waiting for the rest of the county to catch up. Lana stood at the counter, her fingers drumming on the wood as the clerk retrieved a case box from the archives. It had been 20 minutes since she left the bus site, but her hands still felt dirty with its dust. "Here we are," the clerk said, sliding the file forward with both hands like it might fall apart if mishandled. Field Trip 6B Holstead, May 19th, 1986, sealed after 5 years, no updates. Lana nodded and carried the heavy box to one of the side desks. She opened the lid slowly, as if afraid something would leap out. Inside, photos of the children's roster. Class rosters, a list of personal items reportedly packed for the trip, and very bottom a report stamped in red: missing persons presumed lost. No evidence of foul play. That stamp had haunted the town for decades. No evidence, no foul play, no children, but Lana had always suspected there was more. Every owner had. The bus driver's name was Carl Davis, a part-time employee recently hired, barely vetted. He had no wife, no children, and had reportedly skipped town shortly after the disappearance. He was never found either. And then there was the substitute teacher. Ms. Delaney was sick that week in her place. M. Atwell, a Womano 1, remembered hiring. The records listed her address, but it was now an overgrown lot on the edge of town. She'd never been seen again either. Lana leaned back in her chair, staring at the photocopied class photos. She still remembered their names, their laughter in the halls, their little backpacks swinging as they raced toward the yellow bus in the parking lot. She traced a finger over one face in particular. Nora Kelly, wide green eyes, a missing tooth, and a pink ribbon tied in her hair. Nora had lived 2 houses down from Lana. Back then they had shared popsicles on the curb. Every summer the photo made Lana's chest ache until a knock snapped her back into the present. Deputy Hera stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Sheriff, you need to see this." They were at the hospital. 15 minutes later, a woman had been found by a fishing couple half a mile from the dig site. She was barefoot, dressed in tattered clothes that didn't match any local brands. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and barrel-like conscious, but she was alive. The nurse stopped Lana outside the exam room. "Schweistable, no ID, mid-30s. Keep saying she's 12 years old. We thought it was Tromontal. She gave us her name." The nurse handed Lana a clipboard scrolled across the top in trembling handwriting. Nora Kelly. Lana's knees nearly buckled. "She says she was on a school field trip, then us," added gently, "and that she's been trying to get home ever since." The woman inside the room sat up slowly when Lana entered. Her hair was long, tangled, her face drawn and pale, but the eyes, they were unmistakable, green-wide. Lana stopped at the foot of the bed. "Nora," the woman blinked, her eyes welled up. "You got old," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. Lana felt her throat close. "You remember me?" Nora nodded. "You had chickenpox. You were supposed to come." 2 tears burned in Lana's eyes. She walked slowly to the chair beside the bed and sat, too stunned to speak. "They told me no one would remember." Nora whispered that no one would come. "Who told you that?" Lana asked gently. Nora looked past her out the window, then she turned it back, voice a whisper. "We never made it to Morning Lake." The sun had dipped behind the trees. By the time Lana drove back to the sheriff's office, the golden hour light filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across her desk. She didn't sit down. Instead, she stood staring at the whiteboard she had cleared that morning. It now held 15 names tacked up in 20 columns above them in red marker. Morning Lake Field Trip, May 1986. Below, a new heading: Nora Kelly survived, returned. She circled Nora's name, then added, found May 5th, 2025, near Morning Lake site, appears to have aged. Normally believe she's 12 years old. No memory of events after the bus left school. Repeats the phrase, "We never made it to Morning Lake." Lana exhaled slowly. Something didn't make sense. If Nora had been alive all this time, where had she been, and what about the others? By 9 p.m. she was back at the hospital. The doctors had run basic evaluations, no signs of injury, sun exposure, dehydration, and psychological trauma. Her DNA was binary processed, but Lana didn't need the test. It was her, she was sure. Nora had been moved to a quieter wing. When Lana entered, she found her curled beneath a blanket, staring at a small paper cup of water on the tray. "Hi again," Lana said softly. Nora looked up. Her face still held the gaunt fragility of someone too long away from the world, but her voice was clearer. "You believe me, don't you?" "I do," Lana said. Nora gave a sad smile. "Most don't." Lana took a seat. "Can I ask you something?" Nora nodded. "Do you remember the bus ride?" Nora looked down. "Only the beginning. The driver didn't talk much. He wasn't our usual guy, and there was someone else, a man, waiting by the fork in the road." Lana leaned forward. "Do you remember what he looked like?" "Neutrally, I think he had a beard. I just remember what he said." "What was that?" Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said the lake wasn't ready for us yet, that we'd have to wait." Lana felt their chill crawl up her arms. "He got on the bus," Nora said, "and then, I don't know, I woke up in a barn, but it wasn't a barn anymore. It was like a home, but the windows were covered and the clocks were all wrong." "What do you mean?" They allocated. "It was Tuesday, even when it wasn't. They wouldn't let us talk about Biforu, had to use new names." Lana tried to keep her face neutral. "Who's they?" Nora swallowed. "There were two of them at first, a woman and the man. She called him Mr. Avery. I don't know if it was his real name. She disappeared after a few months. I think she got sick." "Do you know where the barn was?" Nora shook her head. "They moved us around, sometimes in vans. We weren't allowed to look outside. They said people had forgotten about us, that it was better this way." Lana sat in stunned silence. "Some of the others, they forgot about school, about home." Nora said, "But I didn't. I never did." Lana reached into her coat pocket and slid something onto the tray, a faded yearbook photo. Nora picked it up and stared. "That's Mesh," whispered, "and that's Caleb and Marcy." And she stopped, her eyes filling with tears. "You kept this?" Lana nodded. "I never stopped." Nora clutched the photo to her chest. Later that night, Lana sat alone in her truck parked outside the old H. Halstead barn on County Line Road. She'd remembered something from Nora's prescription about the clocks, the way the windows were boarded. This barn had belonged to a man named Frank Avery. He died in 2003, but he had a son named Martin Avery. Last known address unknown. Lena stepped out of the truck and stared at the silhouette of the barn in the moonlight. The wind rustled the grass. A loose door creaked softly. She moved toward the side of the building, her flashlight casting long shadows across dry wood. Something glinted near the base of the barn wall. Metal. She crouched and found it, a small bracelet tangled in the weeds. She picked it up. Plastic, fade purple, etched with a child's name in blocky handwriting. Kimi. Lana's breath caught. Kim Leng, one of the 15, a quiet, artistic girl who loved cartoons and wrote her name on everything. Lana stood slowly, her heart pounding. The past wasn't just whispering anymore, it was screaming. The bracelet was still in Lana's hand when she returned to the station just after midnight. She didn't turn on the overhead lights, just the lamp on her desk, casting a pool of amber across the surface. The rest of the office remained quiet and still. She placed the bracelet beside the class photo, lining it up with the face of Kim Lung. She'd been 10 years old, wore glasses, loved dinosaurs, and now this found beside a barn, linked to a man with no current address. Lana picked up the landline and dialed the Texas Missing and Unsolved Cold Case Unit. She left a detailed message requesting a full report on Martin Avery and his last known CAs. She didn't expect an answer until morning, but something was happening now and she couldn't sleep with ghosts pressing in at the windows by sunrise. The morning lake dig site was buzzing with quiet urgency, more of the earth around. The buried bus had been cleared and a second team from the state's Historical Preservation Unit had arrived to document the excavation, less because of its history and more because of what it now represented. Lana stood beside the emergency exit, arms folded, watching the forensic texts catalogue every inch of the hollowed shell. She had barely slept. Her mind was too loud with memory, and Denise Sheriff, one of the investigators, called, lifting a sealed evidence. Slevagore, going to want to see this. She walked over the tech. A man in his late 40s with square glasses and a quiet voice held the plastic pouch carefully inside. Was a photograph, color slightly curled at the edges, but not aged like its hold had been. Lana frowned. Where was it? Wedged behind the metal paneling above. The back left window looked recently placed. Honestly, she took the photo and studied it. Showed a group of children, maybe 8 or 9 of them, standing in front of what looked like a low wooden building. A barn, a lodge. It was hard to tell. The siding was weathered, the windows boarded. The kids' expressions were strange, blank, not frightened, not smiling, just absent a fewoff. The faces were unmistakable: Marcy, Kimmy, Caleb, and there in the center, Naraha, green eyes, wide but vacant. But Lana's stomach dropped as she noticed something else behind the children, barely visible in the shadows of the doorway. Was a man, tall, bearded, his face mostly obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. She flipped the photo over. There was writing on the back, the chosen year to no date, no location. Just those words. Back at the station, Lana laid the photo beside the ghost notebook and her growing collection of names and fragments. Year 2. That meant they had been held for longer than she dared imagine. She opened Ida County map and began cross-referencing all Avery-owned properties, abandoned buildings, and old religious sites in Theria. One Quarter-Eye Riverview camp, an old summer retreat for children purchased in 1984 by a private family trust. The land records had been scrubbed. Property had remained offered since the early 90s South. It sat at the edge of the national forest, 30 miles from the bus site. Lana circled it in red ink. That afternoon, she brought the photo to Nora the moment the image touched her hands. Nora gasped, her fingers trembled. This was after the first winter, she said softly. We were made to pose once a season to show progress. She looked up, tears forming in her eyes. That building, it's where they kept us the longest. Do you know where it is? Nora shook her head slowly. We weren't allowed outside without blindfolds. But I remember. Sounds a river, a whistle at sunset, and the air, it always smelled like burning pinalanas. Mind clicked into gear. Riverview Camp was named for its proximity to River Bend, and there had once been a logging train that passed through that region. Its whistle used to echo 4 miles at dusk. Do you recognize this man? Lana asked, pointing to the shadowed figure in the photo. Nora hesitated. That's not Mr. Avery. She whispered. That's someone worse. Worse, they called him Father Elijah, but Hewant. A priest. He just liked the sound of it. Lana felt a chill work up her spine. What happened to him? Nora stared at the photo. I don't know, he just stopped coming one day, after year 3, then we were moved again, different place, different rules. Some didn't make it, some. She broke off, her voice cracking. Some forget their own names. Lana placed a gentle hand on Nora's. You didn't forget, said. You came back, Nora gave a fragile nod. But they're still out there, some of them. I feel it, the others. She looked Lana directly in the eyes. They didn't want to be found that night. Lana drove north, toward Riverview Camp. The road narrowed to gravel, and the trees thickened like walls. Fog gathered low. On the ground, curling between roots and old fence posts, her headlights caught a faded wooden sign, half swallowed by vines. Riverview Youth Retreat, private land. She parked.